speeding bullets. More powerful than a locomotive. Able to leap tall buildings at a single bound. Look, up in the sky, it's a bird.
It's a plane!
He's here. He's actually here. This is early, right? I swear this is a little earlier than what we were all expecting. Not that I'm complaining, because I cannot wait to get into this one. Stay tuned after the jump and let's deep dive on Magmatron. Wow. I mean, wow. Right? Like, if I was to put together a list of the characters I thought most unlikely to ever get a second go around in the Plastic Fantastic, Magmatron probably would have been top of the list. It is, I've said it before,
and I'll say it again, man, I love being a turtle.
Not that, but what a time to be a Transformers collector. This is unbelievable. He just looks amazing. The contrast between, like, you know, animal skin scaly textures and machine parts really do make him feel like some kind of techno-organic eldritch horror with, you know, I don't know, a samurai flair to him. He's got to be one of the most cohesively over-designed characters ever to grace the Transformers. A lot of backpack, but for everything he does, you find it's pretty easy to forgive. I mean, look at that head sculpt. His teeth are painted. The little, like, cheek guard teeth are there. He's just ferocious. And Lansaurus has teeth all the way around. Why couldn't Grimlock have teeth all the way around? The paint apps on him are just super primo. The metallic textures mixed with, like, the matte finish and the poured plastic just makes for some amazing surface detail variation. Like, even from semi-gloss of his faceplate to the metallics of his teeth and cheek tooths and the metallic gold crest, it just looks really, really good. And then you've got, you know, the matte plastic of his dino parts, all phenomenally textured to pick up all those details, the gold accents, the kind of sparkly gunmetal metallic bits. He really is, deco-wise, just an incredible fusion of
man and machine, power extreme.
Man, he is all the Centurions. But who exactly is Magmatron? Well, here's the gist. He is, in Transformers terms, the Rizbot. Charismatic, cool, calm under fire, knows exactly what he wants and how to get it. Magmatron suffers no fools. He's got that super cool vibe where he's happy to hang back in the ship, sitting in his big comfy chair, letting everyone do what needs to be done, unless of course the opportunity presents itself to wail on Big Convoy, in which case you can guarantee he'll be there and ready to put the hurt on. He's out to try and get the Anglemar energy that we got introduced to in Beast Wars 2, but eventually he discovers that that's actually the essence of Unicron. And once he works that out, he is having none of it. No Unicron for Magmatron. Cybertron is his. So, you know, he goes up against him, gets beat. Goes up against him again, gets super beat. Comes back again to wail on Big Convoy one last time before realizing, you know what, they're all gonna have to work together if he's gonna realize the Cybertron that he wants to see. So they lay down arms, get it together, and take care of business. And I gotta say as well, for how much he does, right, you do have to, you know, find yourself occasionally wiggling some parts out the way to get full access to the articulation. For 3 separate, radically different dinosaurs that fuse together into one dude, he's real sturdy. Like, nothing's unlocking, nothing's coming off. He's not too egregiously kibbly, because he's so big. Like, this backpack doesn't feel nuts. I do think the original figure might have handled the head wings a little bit bigger. They're enormous on this, like really just egregiously enormous. And the way they mount next to his head gives him some huge Princess Leia buns. But I guess it does give you more articulation for how you want to deal with the issue of giant head wings. Pretty considerate of them though to have added this sculpted element underneath so that you've got clearance for the seesaw.
Get off our seesaw! Yeah!
God, I keep just getting lost in those acid green eyes. Also, I know there's a lot of people who hate the tail butt, and I can kind of see where you're coming from. It kind of ends up giving him a look like he's from Dinosaurs. But it was part of the original, and personally I feel like it just adds to his whole like monstrous demon devil man kind of vibe. Little Predacon crystal. The attention to detail is really something else. I do find I wish that the dinosaur little arms still tucked away down his sides. That would help these sit a little flatter, be a little less obtrusive. And that's kind of a little bit of a recurring theme with this guy, especially when it comes to the articulation. Everything that he has to do to be him is incredible, and they've done it amazingly. But at the same time, you can't mash 3 dinosaurs into one dude and not have some clearance issues. So let's take a look at his articulation, shall we? So starting with the head, you just get some twisty. There's no upper downy ball joint action to be had because that head really is, you know, a skysaur, pterosaur, pterodon, Skysaurus. He does have bendy ears, so he still has all the wing articulation that he has in, you know, dino bird mode. Also, surely, red pterosaur, purple tyrannosaur, that can't be an accident, right? They're definitely referencing the original Beast Wars with that one. Surely, come on. His arms have an amazing ratchet. You gotta get the wings out the way at every turn because they'll get in the way of literally everything you're trying to do. Shoulders come up to about there on that arm. Same on the other because that head can move, which is great. Bicep swivel just above his elbow joint, which I reckon honestly is the best place to put these things, right? If you just use the single elbow joint that's there, that's great articulation, but he's actually got 2, so you can get a super articulated elbow that doesn't actually feel too gappy, which is nice. Wrist swivel, hands can bend backwards, and his fingers are articulated as one piece with a separate thumb. There's his, you know, 5mm post for holding stuff. I'm not a huge fan of just having that sat in the hand like that. It does ruin some illusions, but because his hands are so big, it's not the deal breaker that it sometimes is. He's got a waist swivel. You gotta make sure that the tail is actually untabbed from that butt piece, otherwise the waist swivel is locked in. And he can pretty well go all the way around, but there is like a groove at the back here where that does sit. These hip skirts get in the way of his arm articulation and his leg articulation a little bit, but they're actually on a double pivot. Then the sculpting articulation integration of his legs is just phenomenal. So the thighs, like the musculature of the dino mode, sits around that great big universal joint. Super satisfying clickety clunk clunk ratchet. His knee joint is hidden inside of that sculpt, and it's carried really far around. So as you go for that really deep knee bend, it's only at the last second is any kind of internal workings exposed. And I love the way that this comes out to thicken that dino leg so he hasn't got like a chickeny leg thing going on. It does hinder his foot from sliding forward and having that forward tilt, but you can cheat that pretty easily just by untabbing it. And if you want, you can leave it untabbed, and it's really not going to affect how well he stands or, you know, anything like that. But it's also not a huge deal to plug back in. Articulated heel spur, all the way ankle tilt. As you're posing him out, you are gonna have to, you know, make some adjustments with the hip skirts, the head wings and things like that to be able to hit the shapes that you want, but you can get most everything that you're wanting to do. The only thing that I think is a real shame is that there wasn't some way to get a ball jointed neck in there. It would be really good to be able to have him, you know, do a superhero landing or something like that and still be able to like look up, or even looking down. Because he's so tall, it would be really good to have him loom on some peeps. Now he does come with a bunch of accessories, all of which are parts for me, which again I know is something that people don't super vibe on, but given that he himself is the ultimate parts former, you know, I'm cool with it. I do always think when a part of you becomes your weapon, like what if you drop it? What do you do then? You can't transform. I guess you can't transform. So, first and largest is his Policio shield. Has this piece here, folds up, it's got a bracket, it's got a peg. It goes on this arm, port, peggy clip, clip peg. You do need to make sure when you put it on at first that you've got good clearance. Once it's on, it's not going anywhere. Again, clearance. Clearance is a recurring theme with this bad boy, because anywhere you're moving this around now, it's gonna catch on his ears and catch on his hip skirts, but I guess that's what you get for being such a massive armored, you know, fin-pincered dude. Also, it might just be me, but I can't see a plesiosaur fin without thinking about that Ted Danson Loch Ness movie. Is that even a good movie? I loved it as a kid. I'm afraid to rewatch it just in case it sucks, but blew my mind when I was a little fella. It does look mean though, right? And in homage to the original's action, you can pincer these. Chop, so it's like a grabby, stabby, pincer claw. Even his defense is offensive. That's just how Magmatron do. Then he's got his made from a part of him sword with his like spine, which conceptually I love. The execution looks cool, but it is that soft flexy rubber. So if ever you have it sat not perfectly straight, like even out of the tissue paper, it had a little bit of a bend to it, but that just pegs into that hand quite securely too, I might add. And it looks good. It does. It's a nice appropriate size. The originals always felt like it was a little bit of a understated sword, more of like a, what's it called? A dirk? Is that what a little sword's called? A big knife more than anything.
You call that a knife? This is a knife.
That's not a knife, that's a spoon.
All right, you in. I see you've played knifey spoony before.
But this definitely has sword quality to it. Which also brings us to the plethora of blast effects he comes with. So one of the things, which I think these are just Omega Supremes again, I can't remember. Who can keep track? Well, lots of people do, but whatever. Purple blast effects. The instructions show that you can get a bunch of them, and then because there's just 5mm ports in, you can then take that blade and give it a little bit of a purple energy extension, which does make it like a really big sword, but, you know, it's all soft plastic, so it does, you know, lilt a little bit. On top of that, with the sword, you can kick it old school, bend that down and around a little bit, and then it's kind of got its, you know, it's gun action, so you can fire the blade in a even more parts formy move. Like, pah, ha ha ha. Can I have that back? Could I have that back, please? I need that. I guess, you know, you can blast effect that gun if you wanted. I personally didn't like it on the original and don't super like it here, so I can't imagine other than right now to show Oliol ever doing this again. But I mean, look at that, would you? You really can't argue with the results. He's mean. This is a mean prehistoric death machine. From the future, but in the past. Man, Transformers is complicated. Also, if for some reason worse comes to worse and he finds himself without his spinal column sword and his Policio bod shield, he can always pull off his ears, and then you've got his twin blades, much like the original again. So being just cast in the plain red of the, you know, Skysaurus, it does make them blend in when they're attached to the wings, but I do find it kind of just makes them just sort of look like sticks. They're not the coolest weapons I've ever seen. It's nice that he has them, and I can imagine if you'd never fought him before, it being a bit of a surprise when all of a sudden he changes it up and comes at you with these. But I don't know, even if the back half of it had some of that lighter pink, just to make it feel like something about it was, you know, bladed, just to break it up a little bit. Everything else about him is so primo that these just sit flat. So Magmatron is definitely another one of those characters and figures where upon announcement, I was like, yeah, okay. But that original is already so OP, I don't know how they could possibly top that. And then you go and get the original out, and you're like, ah, okay. So this new iteration is actually embodying my memories of how cool the original is, because as sick as that original toy is, it cannot compete with the grandiose splendor that is this Commander class release. I mean, look at them together. It's almost got a Lio Jr. quality going on, right? It's his little brother. Admittedly, not quite as shiny as the execution of the original, but I can forego that shininess in favor of just that hulking scale and how much better the articulation is. Like, I remember in my mind, I was like, the original Magmatron's super articulated. Then you bust him out and you're like, oh yeah, he's got the Gorilla Grip thing on. And whilst his sort of, you know, base scheme may not be as pearlescent, they did swap out all the yellow of the original for a metallic gold on this bad boy, and I can totally get behind that. The only aspect that I think the original might have over this new version is the way those head wings work. I gotta admit, that kind of like, you know, levered system, it's fun to look at. I enjoy it. It's automated, and I also think the blade integration is a little more snazzy. And this kind of pink pearlescent quality to the underside of the wings is, in my opinion, much cooler than the straight up like bubblegum pink of the new one. But that does match the anime more, so it's that age-old question. Toy accuracy or anime accuracy? Personally, I'm always more than happy to accept animated accuracy over toy accuracy. But it's a very deeply personal choice. I also feel like we gotta quickly peep him alongside another big purple dinosaur.
Yo, you coming, G?
No, not that one.
Ah yes, you may be big and bad, but remember, I was the original. Without my contributions, you would fail to exist. You may be a leader, but I am the commander.
And I think I'd be completely remiss in my duties if we didn't peep him alongside Big Convoy. That's a hell of a prehistoric pairing you got going there. Tell you what, that box art Tusk better not just be a tease. They really got to follow through on that, because I'm sure I am not the only person who would be fiending for an update to Big Convoy. As all time as this figure is, if they can upscale and do the same glow up to Big Convoy that they've done to Magmatron here, that's going to be one hell of a convoy. And just as a final quick comparison, I thought we got to peep him alongside last year's Commander class offering. I really didn't think he had the height to match, but he does. Super Optimus looks like he's in trouble. In terms of transformation, Magmatron really is quite unique within the Transformers fandom. Admittedly, we've had combiners before, we've had base combiners, we've had duocons, but we've never had anything quite like Magmatron. So first, let's deal with these weapons. Take the sword, take out the spine, pivot it out, you'll know you've done it right if it starts to look like a hunk of meat. Take this and pretty well just unfold everything that feels like it can unfold. And you've, you know, done what you need to do. Untab this whole arm section, which is easier said than done because it is really on there. Bird head then should just, you know, detach once you move the legs. Turning these disembodied chunks into their separate dinosaurs is where most of the meat and potatoes of this lie. So I might be paraphrasing this a little bit here, but basically if you fold this bit and then you twist this bit around, take that bit, unpeg it, peg it around, peg it down. Twist it sideways, fold that up, twist that around. If you bend that down there, tab that in, you'll find there's ports for that there, that pegs in. Then if you twist that, flip that, move that, bend that, soon you'll be ready to bop that, and then you got yourself some dinosaurs. Man, look at these guys together. The cheerleader effect is strong with this posse. Like, what's not to love here? 3 dinosaurs. What's better than 1 dinosaur? 3. 3 is better than 1. You could understand if like these dinosaur modes were really, you know, quite secondary to the primary robot mode, given how much they have to do to be able to get together like that. But they've really put in just as much effort into each dinosaur as they have into Magmatron as a whole. Let's take a quick look at each of these dino dudes and see what they're all about. And let's start with Skysaurus, the Quetzalcoatl. In this mode, this kind of gradient that they've got going on the wings really comes alive. And with like that, it's soft, but with that gloss, it makes him look really alive. I do think that potentially the wings could have gotten away with being a little bit more articulated, but it is an impressive wingspan nonetheless. So, you know, that you can get back and forward, flappy, twisty, uppy, down. The wings can fold away a little bit. It would be cool if they could fold away a little bit more just for walking poses. That little claw foot is on a limited ball joint, but it can still do what you need to do for him to walk on the ground. The neck at the main piece doesn't have a lot of up and down, but you do get a bend from the upper neck and the head, so he can do a dunking bird if he needs to.
It's drinking the water!
That mouth opens and the inside is painted, as well as each of those tiny silver dolphin teeth being painted up as well. The legs are on a ball joint at the hips, then he's got a knee, ankle and foot. He's big. Then we've got the mighty Elasmosaurus. Now, his articulation, just by, you know, his very virtue, a little less articulated, but the front flippers are on a ball joint and they've got that little pivot from his pincer action, so you can move them a little bit. The back ones just have a little bit of in and out, but you know, how much are you doing with a flipper anyway? The neck is made up of like 4 universal joints and then a hinge just before the head, and his mouth opens again, inside painted, toothy pegs. You've got a cool gradient going down him as well, and the skin texture is just great. I will say, I know a lot of people are going to be disappointed by each of these neck sections being a little hollow. I'm sure for those that are truly upset by it, there's definitely going to be third-party space fillers that come out, but it's a big green swimming dinosaur. We're here for you, Seasaurus. And then we've got the hero of the trio, the Gigantosaurus. He was definitely the hardest to transform of the bunch. This whole like section here was difficult. And like that is pretty gappy, but you can get him in most positions where you don't really notice it, especially like, you know, from the front and 3/4. It's pretty cohesive on the whole. You can get some left to right out of that head. You can get it up and down, but it will break the lines. His jaw, sadly, is the least opening of the three, which is strange because, you know, he's the one you want to do the most chomping. He can kind of just smile for the camera. His little vestigial arms are on ball joints, and then you get all the same range of motion from the legs that you did in robot mode with the addition of that ankle tilt being freed up. From the back is where you can see the most machine parts, but who's, you know, posing out their figures so that it's a dino butt to the front. What I also like is they managed to put in some tail swivel. I do think it's a little bit of a bummer that they weren't able to carry that stripe down onto this last piece. That seems like a missed opportunity to me, but it is a great looking head sculpt. And on the purple, that green eyeball really pops. And I figure we got to do a couple of dino comparisons just to really give you a sense of scale. So here is the Lansaurus alongside T-Rex, and like, that's impressive. That's worthy of a Jurassic Park showdown, right? They are remarkably similar in size. Like leader class dinosaur on both fronts. It's like the Magmatron mold is definitely a little more articulated, but not by a huge amount. And then the obvious comparison for Skysaurus is Pterosaur. Ah! And like, they're a similar size. I guess, like, you know, body balancing neck, but their wingspan cannot be compared. Skysaurus is doing like days across the ocean Osprey style. And then there's no real direct Beast Warsy comparison to be had with Seasaurus, but I guess the closest thing is probably Studio Series Sludge. Just a couple of long neck dudes. I mean, Sludge has a lot more body mass. But in terms of, you know, long neck articulation and the size of the bite, Seasaurus has got him beat there. So you might think that the dino action stops there, but as well as being three separately awesome dinosaurs, there is still Magmatron's Mighty Chimera mode to have a look at. So I'm gonna fast track that one because this is definitely a mode where it is about the destination much more so than it is the journey. So you're going to want to start with the Seasaurus, and you're pretty much just wanting to separate him back into his two component pieces. Pretty well fold the body back into the shield, and then you kind of loosely get the arms out and you use a little connector to get them to sit flush and ready for the next phase. Then you're going to bring in your boy Gigantosaurus, and you'll find you don't actually do a huge amount to him. It's more like things happen to him. You just want to disconnect this back plate, fold that up and out of the way. Then Seasaurus will come back in, and he kind of just grips around the bottom half of your big boy. Grip inside with those pegs on the bottom of his tail, and then those supports are going to hold him on as well. So you can see this monster starting to take shape a little bit here. Then you're going to bring that other half back in, and pretty much every peg port tab that you can see is going to go into joining this back together. Then you want to get Skysaurus and pretty much just twist his wings around backwards and stretch him all out. So it's incredibly finicky to get it together, but once it is together, it's definitely not shaking apart. Like, surprisingly, for how it just kind of looks like a weird fan mode that someone would share in a Facebook group that then no one else on Earth would replicate, it works, right? You can't say they didn't do it, because they did. Should it exist? No. Is it a crime against nature and good design sense? Yes. But he did it in the show, and now the toy does it. Take from that what you will. In fact, I think this is probably the most disturbing chimera since Full Metal Alchemist. So look, if it hasn't become apparent already throughout this review, I am a huge advocate for this figure. I'm a big fan of the character, love the original toy, and in terms of an update, I really don't think anyone could be displeased or underwhelmed by this release. In a year of spectacular figures so far, he's already a real standout. Even amongst other Commander class figures, he's a real standout. If you were on the fence for some unknown reason, honestly, get amongst it. Because a time will come, I promise you, where you will wholeheartedly regret not picking up this figure if you're able to. He's just so unique. He represents all the best strangeness that is the Transformers fandom, and I just couldn't be happier with how this has turned out. I just can't stop looking at him. So, I want to know, do y'all feel the same? How are we feeling about Magmatron? Had you really, was he on your radar before this even came out? Was your mind blown like mine when we first got to see that Legacy United poster and he was there front and center in all of his gnashing toothy glory? Hit me up in the comments below. I want to know, you got him? You getting him? You excited? You gonna pass? Let me know. So until the next one, I'll see you in the comments. Let's get nerdy with it. Catch.